You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. It is Monday. It is time to commence a new broadcast week here on the old network. Time to kick things off with everyone's favorite bi-weekly source for all things options related, known far and wide as the Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. Don't forget the, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network, on which so many of you are binging these days. If I sound a wee bit different, it's because we did some upgrading to the old studio over the weekend. New hot mic swapped in here. Still dialing it in and still getting a feel for the hot spots and the cold spots here on this mic. We'll get it dialed in over the next couple of weeks here, listen. But that old mic, thousands of episodes, thousands of hours, over a decade's worth of content produced with that bad boy. So I was looking at it. I thought maybe we'd include it for one of our pro winners, maybe, but I think we might have to hold on to that one. That one's a bit of a keepsake, bit of a historic bit of equipment in the world of options and derivatives content. But intriguing stuff. Hope you folks are fun. If you're intrigued, you're like, hey, what's he talking about with that pro trading crate? As well as, of course, all these exclusive shows. I mean, if you hit that pro button, you have 200 plus hours that you can come in and just listen to your heart's content. You're closing in on 10 days worth of content with no eating, no sleeping, no bathroom breaks, no nothing, just mainlining content as far and as aggressively as your heart's content. Of course, on top of that, you get new shows every week. You get live access to this, to everything else we do. And of course, the much anticipated pro trading crate. Don't mention it to the Rock Lobster. He takes a lot of umbrage at that. But for you folks, it's available, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. As we keep on going to see who's joining us, going to introduce him at the top of the show. Going to do things a little bit different this week. I am joined by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the show. To you, sir.
Yes, thank you. And I respectfully disagree, because you could listen to the 200 hours of programming while eating and while going to the bathroom.
You could, but if you wanted to get it all in at once, I'm saying you 200 plus consecutive hours is what I'm saying. If you break it up, then yeah, you're going for months. If you want to just mainline,
no, you don't need to break it up. You just take the phone with you to the bathroom.
Okay, that's true. I had neglected the mobile component of our audience. So there you go. You can do that, but sleeping, kind of hard to sleep and listen. So you're gonna have to stay awake.
Agreed.
For the full 10 or so days. So be prepared for that when you hit that pro button. And also joining us, the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. Mr. Meatball, welcome back to the show. To you, sir.
What's up, guys? Good to be here.
Let me start the show before we even get to our 80s wrestling really quickly. Let me set the scene. Allow me to paint you a picture, listeners, of my day on Friday, because it involves one, Mark, the greasiest of meatballs, Sebastian. we had no shows on Friday because I was at my son's graduation. And as you do as a parent at graduation, you await that moment when your child crosses the stage and gets the diploma. So I had my phone ready. Of course, you have to have it on because you're going to take videos and photos. But I had it set to do not disturb because I'm not a jerk. I don't want to interrupt the entire proceedings for everyone. And so I'm there ready. We're a few minutes away. The principal is reading out their speech ahead of the graduation. And lo and behold, what should happen? But my phone should erupt in my pocket. And my phone, I'm not that guy. My phone never rings. I'm never that guy. So even though I brought it out, I thought, well, what if I'm that guy? I said, you know what? I'm going to put it on Do Not Disturb just in case. I don't want to be that guy. But my phone never rings. I have it on whitelist. No one gets through to me. And I had it on Do Not Disturb on top of that. Nonetheless, as my son's about to take his steps onto the stage, my phone erupts. And I had forgotten because my phone never rings. I had set my ringtone years ago to the theme song from this very show, the option block. So what erupts throughout the entire auditorium right before my son is about to walk on the stage, but an extremely loud rendition of the theme song, the guitar riff to start the theme song for this program. And of course, all eyes turn to me, and my son is suitably embarrassed as a result. And I lay it all at the feet of one greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian. So I don't know why my phone likes you so much. It puts you through my Do Not Disturb.
Yeah, I don't know why.
But c'est la vie, sir.
Seems to respect me more than you do.
So apparently you were a featured guest at my son's graduation. Does it make you feel good, sir?
Of course.
Did you answer the calls?
Congrats to your son, by the way.
I did not answer.
Very proud of what he's accomplished.
Yes, I did not answer the call because he was mid-stride at the moment, but it was intriguing. I got some good looks. Let me put it that way. I was that guy. You never want to be that guy, and I was that guy. Thanks to one, again, the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Marks. But at least everyone was regaled with the joys that is the theme for the old OB, because now it is time for the theme of our 80s wrestling trivia. All right. And keen-eared longtime listeners may notice I did introduce our cohorts earlier than I normally do, not just to give Mark Sebastian a hard time for interrupting the graduation with a fine theme song, by the way, but also because we're going to do it a little differently. The 80s wrestling world kind of bled into the pop culture, the real world last week. Everyone heard the news of the passing of the legendary heel known as the Iron Sheik. He's had an interesting career, obviously one of the greatest heels of all time. In my mind, when I think back on 80s wrestling heels, a lot of people think of Piper and stuff. I actually think of Piper as a face a lot, because he did work face a lot. But Sheik never did. Sheik was a heel through and through. He was one of the bad guys on Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. He was just the iconic heel, him and like Nikolai Volkov going up there against Sergeant Slaughter. Some of the iconic face versus heel moments of all time, let alone 80s wrestling. And then, of course, he had another act, if you will, on Twitter, where he kind of became this Twitter personality, very vulgar, not, of course, safe for the kids, but nonetheless just became a huge star on Twitter, like 500,000, something 1,000 followers, 600,000 followers, something like that, just tweeting out all sorts of pearls of wisdom. He had pinned at the top of his account, listeners, take it all in caps, of course, because he's the Sheik. Take a minute of your day to be nice to someone, you dumb SOB. So that was kind of the dual nature, the dichotomy of the Sheik. Vulgar, loud, obnoxious, but also respectful, humble, all that kind of fun stuff. So the only person we could do this week was the Iron Sheik. It didn't make sense to guess him. Everyone knew who it was going to be. Even Andrew, who knows nothing about wrestling, knew the Iron Sheik and spoke of him last week. So this guy permeated many other layers of pop culture. So instead, we'll go around the horn and we'll get everyone's enduring memories of the ironest of Sheiks, and maybe we'll award prizes or points based on who has the best. Let's go out first to the unclest of Mike's, because you did not interrupt my son's graduation, sir. Your enduring memories of one Iron Sheik.
Yeah, so my memories of the Iron Sheik I could go on for a long, long time about it. But I mean, there's a few of them. Of course, his camel clutch, to where this finishing move, to where he sits on top of a wrestler sitting on his stomach, or that's on his stomach, and then he just pulls his chin up. Anyone who grew up in the 80s, friends would do that to one another. It hurt pretty bad now that I think back on my childhood days of wrestling with friends doing that move. So that's no joke. The Iron Sheik was a champion amateur wrestler that a lot of people that before he went pro, and then the story behind it is that when he won two champion wrestlers from Iran are before the head of Iran. I don't know if it was called the Ayatollah then, or I don't even know what it was, but it was late 60s, early 70s. And the guy said to the Sheik's buddy, he said, anything you want, you can have it. And the guy says, well, I'd like you to start up a home for the homeless people or something like that. And so the guy had him killed. And so the Iron Sheik realized at that time, it's time for him to get out of Iran. And so he went to the United States. He met Vern Gagne. Vern Gagne got him into pro wrestling. And he had an amazing career. A couple other memories, of course, is he beat Bob Backlund for the WWF heavyweight title. That's another good memory. And then, of course, that Hollywood jabroni blonde Hulk Hogan beat him a couple months later, so he didn't have the title for too long. But I'll say for the memory of the day for the Iron Sheik, the guy was such a heel that he was getting interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund one time, and there was a live turkey because it was right before Thanksgiving, and the Iron Sheik said, this is what I think about America and your holidays. He spit on the turkey. So how many wrestlers can say that they've spit on a turkey? I'll go with that one for my enduring memory of the Iron Sheik.
It is also a gimmick that you probably could not work today. It would be a little different in this environment. So definitely a character and a creature and a gimmick of its time. And Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. Your enduring memories of one legendary Iron Sheik.
I mean, it's got to be when Sergeant Slaughter turned heel. And during the Iraq,
are you going to actually talk about like Iraqi General Sarge on my network? Turn around that Sarge figure on your desk.
The Iron Sheik and Sergeant Slaughter and the General were all, Sergeant Slaughter got the championship, and then lost in WrestleMania 7, I want to say, something like that, maybe WrestleMania 8 to Hulk Hogan. And then decided to go, and then they flipped him face as soon as the Iraq War was over.
Good times.
It was just one of the more embarrassing moments in WWE history.
It was horrible.
And the idea that G.I. Joe's own Sergeant Slaughter would turn heel anti-American was just absolutely ridiculous.
For many kids of the 80s,
Iraqi traitor, I called it.
For many kids of the 80s, you could argue that heel turn even more shocking than Hogan's down the road a little bit because. Sarge was G.I. Joe. He was Americana through and through. So to see him turn Iraqi general traitor. Yeah, Sarge, good friend of the network, big fan of the show. So he might not be happy to have you bring up his darkest moment here on the network. But nonetheless, interesting stuff. In the spirit of the Iron Sheik and being the nice guy that he was, even though he was full of bluster, I'll give a point to each of you. How's that? No one loses in this week that we are celebrating one legendary Iron Sheik as we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, listeners, it's one of those days. It's the start of the week. It's also Fed week, so you might be forgiven for expecting not a heck of a lot from the market, but we are actually in a little bit of rally-ho mode out here. S&P up about 0.4%. The Dow up about 1/3%, and the NASDAQ up about 0.75%. So S&P a little bit north of 4,300, about 4,315. So quite a far cry from the little bit shy of 4,100 we were not too long ago out there, listeners. So a couple 100 points in a couple of weeks. What's that amongst friends out there at the end of the day, listeners? You also might be forgiven for thinking maybe, might be seeing a little bit of vol continuing to come off. But of course, we have the weekend coming back in. We also have a little thing called the Fed coming up this week. So vol actually taking a little bit of a turn back to the upside today, listeners. So yes, it's one of those days, market's green, vol green. Deal with it, listeners. VIX 14.5 when we kicked off the show, up nearly a full point, about 0.9 of a point. VVIX 91 up about 5 points, so getting frothy again, getting juicy. VXX 2840 up about 0.4 of a point. UVXY 2.25 unched. Then again, it is coming, listeners, a 10-for-1 split on June 23rd. So hopefully we'll have a lot more to sink our teeth into after that reverse split. SVIX 2480 down about 0.1 of a point, so pretty much unched as well. UVIX 580 literally unched, and VolQ 17.75 up about 0.5 a point from this time last week. Let's go around the horn the way we just were. Let's go out to the unclest of Mike's first. Uncle Mike, sir, what's catching your eye in yet another Uncle Mike type of day?
Well, I mean, with today, It's the big news is the Fed. Are they going to pause? Are they going to raise? And then the even bigger question is, how's the market going to react to it? Let's say that they pause, and it's the first time they've paused in roughly a year, I believe, or a little bit over a year if they do pause. If that's the case, how's the market going to react? Will the good news of the quantitative tightening excite the market and have it go higher, or is that already factored into the rally with which we have? That's the big question that's out there right now going into this week. We have bonds relatively flat, not a lot of movement on them over the course of the last week. In terms of macro news, Trump was indicted, and it's not a big deal right now in terms of the markets, but in the coming months, we're going to be playing politics again. And that's something that as much as of all the things that I hate talking about on the show, politics is one, Fed is two, and I think I like talking about everything else. I never want to talk about like wars or bad things, of course, but those are the things that we as market participants are going to have to pay attention to, because it is stuff that's going to move the market in one way, shape, or form. And how's the market going to react to it is what we're going to have to really sink our teeth into and have a feel for going forward. In terms of what's driving the market, it's not a large move right now, but what is going to be interesting to see is that if this market continues to have legs and if it does continue to grow, are we going to shift? Meaning, is the market going to be selling off anything AI related, or the magnificent, succulent, sexy seven, or whatever we're calling them? Are we going to shift out of those names, and are we going to go back to some dividend paying stocks and some of the stocks that really, quite honestly, held the market higher, or not higher, but held the market off from really sinking worse than it did last year? And that's the other thing that needs to be addressed. We've had JP Morgan as an example. It's been right around the high 130s, low 140s for a while now. And that's definitely going to be one stock I'm watching as we go into the Fed announcement to see how that reacts to it, along with other stocks that are in a similar category. But that's probably the one that I'll be following the most. It's just because it's a bigger stock. So ultimately, what it boils down to, I think the Iron Sheik didn't want to deal with this Fed announcement. So he said, "I've had enough, you jabronis. I'm done."
We've all had enough of these jabroni Feds. Instead, we have to deal with them at least for one more week, listeners. As we keep on rolling, we also have to deal with the greasiest of meatballs and his endless phone calls at inopportune times. Mr. Meatball, sir, what's catching your eye out there? And yet another Fed week.
Yeah, well, we've got we're clearly above the 4,300 right now. The NASDAQ continues to lead us. The Russell continues to be soft. It's interesting that we're up 18 and the VIX is actually up. VVIX up near 90. Vol getting a little bit of a bid kind of across the board. Your mid-cap banks are down again, which is interesting. KRE down, but you'll take a look at like Comerica and Fifth Third and some of the big mid-caps. They're taking it on the chin. Target seems to be a bottomless pit of dropping, and everything else seems to be a beneficiary there. It's just absolutely stunning. Another name that continues to be hot is SoFi. It's up 10% today. I find that to be pretty fascinating. You got a big move, strong move out of Plug Power, up 11%. Tesla just continues to be strong. And one other name that is moving is AMD and Intel, both of which are up pretty strongly today, which is interesting.
Interesting indeed. Heading into this Fed announcement this week, we didn't obviously have a vol views last week, but we did a fun little extra credit hit with the once and future Dr. Bix, which all of you who are subscribed to the network or subscribed to vol views got in your feed. So we didn't leave you hanging last week. One of the things we talked about on that show, Mr. Meatball, was the once and future and now present Dr. Bix. He liked himself a little bit of a vol swing for the fences heading into the Fed announcement. He bought a bunch of the June 15s for 48 cents heading into the Fed. What are your thoughts on those?
Pretty interesting and pretty cheap. It would be what I would say. I think those puts maybe have run their course, and you maybe want to call it a day, Mark.
Yeah, I was thinking that this morning as well.
spectacular.
I was looking at that this morning as well. I was like, we had a good run. Can't get mad. I was reaching for the brass ring. We almost got there. My fingers swept it, but they did not grasp it. So I think perhaps we might close out the rest of them today. We shall see out there. Listeners, what are your thoughts? You like those June 15 calls? You like June 15 puts? It is Fed week after all. We'll get to some of your thoughts on our questions of the week in a little bit. Let's go out now to the markets. And again, you would be forgiven for expecting a bit of a powder drying kind of day. Everyone kind of playing the wait and see game ahead of the Fed. And that's kind of what we got, at least, for the most part. VIX at 321,000 right now. We've obviously seen it far north of that recently, over 1 million at this point in the show sometimes. So VIX looking comparatively quiet today. The ADV, 832,000 contracts out there. The SPY, 3.5 million right now, 3.55 to be precise. The ADV, 8.6 million. The S, 1.5 million contracts. The ADV, 2.75 million out there for all things SPX. Small caps, IWM listeners, 531,000 contracts. Excuse me, the ADV, a little bit north of 1 million, 1.1 million. It manages to cling to that 1.1 million level, listeners. I thought it would have given up the ghost a long time ago, but hey, small caps here to stay, at least for now. Qs, 1.45 million, the ADV, 3.14 million. So that ADV back up north of 3 million now in Qs land. Once again, let's go back out to the single names and see what's lighting up our tape out there today, listeners. We'll see what kind of day we're having. And you know what? It's a pretty decent day out there in the single names. Cost you 307,000 contracts to break into the top 10. It's been a little bit since we've seen a north of 300K level this portion of the show in single names. That means there's some robust action out there. It gets us to our old friend Oracle. I haven't talked about them in a wee little bit. They have earnings after the bell today. 307,000 contracts on the tape. Looks like they are popping already, up 6.5 handles. So big move ahead of their announcement. Wow, about nearly 6%, 116 in the third right now. And again, good for 307,000 contracts. Number 9, you don't need me to tell you about this one, listeners. It's just a day that ends in Y. We're going to see NVIDIA in there moving a relatively modest $1 right now, 388.75. Good for 331,000 contracts, though. So number 9, we're already at 331,000 listeners. So again, a very respectable day out there. Also intriguing because we're seeing NVIDIA near the bottom of our list. Who's at the top? Number 8, same thing. Amazonians kicked from their usual, let's say, around the number 3 spot place, all the way down to number 8, 363,000 contracts for them. Amazonians popping nearly $2.50 today, nearly 2%. Trading 125.85 right now. So nice little pop for them, but not a lot of options volume to go with it. Number 7, we had NEO. They were popping off, I believe, last Friday. 382,000 contracts on the tape for good old NEO. It seems like NEO going to be here to stay, at least for a little bit. They were trading around 7.75 on Friday, trading about 8.40 right now. So up about 75 cents. So nice little pop for them. I guess folks deciding they are going to be around after all. Worth noting on the electric vehicle front, I did randomly see another Rivian in the wild this past weekend. Intriguing, those cars starting to make their. I need to see some more Fiskars, a few others, and we'll start to see if these things are actually starting to come to fruition. But number 7, NEO today, 382,000 contracts. Number 6, and the Rock Lobster's on. He's always slamming this one of late. He's trying to figure out what the hell they still do. It's Intel, 403,000 contracts, 32.75 right now, up about $1.40 or about 4.5% on the day. So a nice little pop for Intel. Back in the days when I was standing out there in this pit, this was kind of the bellwether of the tech ball. It was this and Microsoft kind of leading the charge. These days, obviously, people still focus on Microsoft. They're keeping their names in there with the AI and the gaming and everything else. But Intel, not as much on the tips of everyone's tongues out there when it comes to all things tech. Maybe they're trying to change that up. We shall see. Nice little pop today. Number 5. Yes, I said number 5. We got a very topsy-turvy list today, listeners. Number 5 is the Fruit Company. 405,000 contracts, up $1.50, trading 182.5 right now. So within spitting distance, a couple of bucks and change of their 52-week high, which was a little bit shy of 185, listeners. So a good day for Apple. Again, the market likes when Apple is green. Market not liking a lot of volume in Apple today, though, listeners. Kind of light business out there. 405,000 contracts. That's not a heck of a lot for Apple. Maybe the market trying to digest this new headset / spatial computing offering from Apple. Don't call it VR. Don't call it AR. It's spatial computing. And they're never going to say the word metaverse. So Apple doing their own thing as they are wont to do. Late to the party as always, but thinking they have the best iteration. Do they? I guess we'll find out. Number 4, we have Carnival Corp. Haven't talked about them in a while. 465,000 contracts. I have a feeling I'm going to be talking about them again in a little bit, so stay tuned, listeners. $14.90 right now, up $1.80. Man, just a banger day for good old CCL. Might have some analyst action out there today. Either way, the stock popping hard, up nearly 14% today. Man, not that long ago, these cruise lines seemed like they were scraping the barrel. It got down to, let's see, 611 over the span of the last year. That was down in October of last year. So a nice run from there. Listen, even more recently, at the end of April, it was 8 3/4. So a nice run just in the last couple of months. Good for 465,000 today. Again, we shall come back to this one. Another one's had a nice run over the last couple of months after looking kind of dicey back in March. This is SoFi. Another one that seemed like it might be circling the bull back in March. All these contagion fears got down to 4 1/4, trading a little over $9 today. 9.04, up nearly $1 today, 86 cents, and almost 11% for SoFi. So banger day for SoFi. It looks like it did hit a new 52-week high today. So folks, feeling the love out there for SoFi. Intriguing. And again, good for 503,000 contracts. Are you slinging a little bit of SoFi, listeners? I'm curious. Hit us up. Let us know. Number 2, we got the chip zone flipping today. AMD taking the top spot, 551,000 contracts. So, 7 points above, 7 slots above NVIDIA in our list today. Don't see that too often. 127.60, up about 270 today, or a little over 2% for AMD. So nice pop for them today. And again, 551,000. So kind of a weird day. We started off pretty heavy, a little north of 300K. We're all the way at number 2. We're only at a little north of 500,000. So it hasn't evolved that much in the interim. Let's get to the top spot and see what we've got cooking. Of course, you know it's Tesla. You don't need me to tell you that, but I will nonetheless. Tesla, 1.17 million contracts, so a little bit more respectable. 247.11 right now, up about 270 on the day. So a nice little pop for Tesla as well. And one of the few names here doing, gangbusters volume out here today, north of 1 million. Nothing else threatening it, but a very steady, a very solid day out there this week. Not exactly a solid time on the earnings front. We're kind of coming to the tail end of it. We have Oracle after the bell today, as I mentioned earlier, but they're already popping hard. So something is afoot with them out there, listeners. We've got Leonard coming up later this week, or all sorts of names. Wiley, so Adobe, some names you still have heard of this week. Kroger, but not a ton out there, listeners. Well, luckily for you, because we like you, we do have updated earnings move results, earnings season, and earnings trades reports for you folks to break down. Let's go to Oracle there today after the bell. I already mentioned they're popping hard. They're pricing in nearly $9, $8.95. They've already moved 6 and change. In the past, they've moved $5.13. So they're pricing in a heck of a lot of extra juice, nearly $4 worth of extra juice. And so far, it's moved around 6. So it's hard to argue that was not worth. Let's go out to Leonard as well. 14th after the bell. 114.25 is where they were trading. They were pricing in $5. In the past, they've moved $4. So a whole $1 worth of extra juice out there in Leonard. Intriguing as well. Let's go out to Kroger, see what's going on the supermarket front. 15th before the bell. 46.17 is where they were trading when we ran these numbers. They were pricing in $2.43. In the past, they've moved $2.38. So pretty much a shrug of the shoulders in Kroger. They're not expecting a heck of a lot of anything different out there, which is intriguing. Same holds for our season. Our season hanging out at 95% right now. Our long-term average, 96. So right, pretty much in line with the long-term average after hanging out well north of 100% for the better part of this season. The last couple of weeks seemed like they took it down, particularly week 5, 66%. That was a lot of underperformance. Week 4, 77%. Tried to get it back week 6, 108%, but not enough to close the deal. So we are back below par yet again there, 95%. You can see all that data for yourselves. TheOptionsInsider.com is the place to go to learn more. As we keep on going into our next segment, it is time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's get weird. Let's get wild. Let's get potentially whimsical. There's always a potential for whimsy here on the show, listeners. And let's see if we have it. Remember, I said we're going to come back to Carnival. Well, we're going to do so right now, listeners. Carnival Corp, as I mentioned, a banger day for them. Up nearly $2, nearly 14%, threatening $15 right now. So quite the pop for them on the year. As I mentioned, they bottomed out back in October. $6.11 a year ago, so mid-June of last year. They were trading a little bit shy of 10, $9.91. So they were looking all right a year ago. Then they kind of fell out of bed. Then they tried to rally. It got to $12.20 in February, back in the first wave of rallies of this year. Then they gave up the ghost again, got it back down to about $8.50, and it hung out there from mid-March until close to the end of April. It was 8.75, right at the end of April. And then from then, it's just been a straight shot up over $6, listeners. Quite the impressive run, again, including an aggressive pop of over $2 if you go back to where they were trading back last week, 12.75, now $14.93. So a nice pop here for Carnival. I guess everybody is out there cruising again, listeners. You out there booking cruises? I guess we'll find out. We'll also find out what the heck was going on out here today, listeners, because it looked like we spotted a pretty sizable roll going up out there. A bit of a old house money roll as well. Someone's sitting on some profits and maybe banking them and then putting them back to work. Well, let's find out. We first noticed 18,000 of the AUG 15 calls going up for $1.15 paper, gobbling those up. That's about a 55 vol, if you are so inclined, listeners. And then against that, we saw 18,000 of the July 11 calls going up for $3.57 paper, dumping those at bad boys. That's about a 66 vol. Are intrigued out there. So first blush, you can look at this, same size, much higher strike on the second spread, second leg. So you could usually intuit that maybe this one worked out. But we went and crunched the numbers. We did the math for you, listeners, to see. And these July calls, they were open back on May 16th when the stock was hovering around 10.25. So substantially below where it is right now. And it looks like paper came in and gobbled up 18,000 of them for prices around 70 cents. They gapped around a bit in chunks. They bought 5,600 for 68 cents, some more for 70, some more for a little higher, some more for a little lower. Total of around 18,000 for prices around 70 cents. So they dumped them for nearly 360 today, listeners. So you're talking $5.1 million in your pocket on that one leg. Not too shabby. But then they didn't stop there. They didn't say, I'm taking my money and running on the cruise lines. They came back in. They came back to play. They said, you know what? There's more upside to be had. Spending $1.15 of that 360 they nearly pocketed here on 18,000 more of the AUG 15s. So sometimes you're throwing bad money after good in these types of trades, but if there is more upside to be had, clearly they think there is. They want to stay invested. They want to stay in the game. They want to stay invited to the party. Mr. Meatball, I'm curious, did you notice these in all of your big money flow? And what are your thoughts on somebody rolling all the way to the bank here in Carnival Cruise Lines and continuing to place her?
Yeah, I saw that trade, actually. It was interesting. Yeah, it's a trader that was right. Rolling out and up. That's my favorite kind of trade. It shows a good track record of a trader that seems to know what they're doing. This is not one I would ignore.
Have you guys been slinging any trades in the cruise lines over there?
Yeah, and actually, Andrew's been all over this. He's put on a couple of different strangles in CCL for some pretty nice profits. So he's done exceedingly well trading around in Charlie Lima.
What you're saying is this is him rolling his 18,000 lots. What you're telling me?
I don't know that he traded that big, but he's definitely doing all right.
You're right. That's a little small for him. He usually doesn't get out of bed for at least 25, 50,000. If we know the rock lobster. Listeners, what are your thoughts on this trade? Obviously, the first leg worked out pretty well. Would you go back to the well again, though? Would you dive back in, buy another 18,000 of the $1.15? Granted, you got some money to burn, hence the house money name. So you're not, even if it all goes up in smoke, you're still sitting on some profits from this trade. So it makes it a little easier to do that. But that said, would you dive back in for a $1.15? They're not giving these away. It's still a 55 vol. These are now pretty much at the money. Let's see, where was the stock when they did this? They did this spread at $14.38. So the stock has run nearly 60 cents already just from that level. So it's already looking pretty good. But would you dive back in, listeners, on these, or would you take the money and run? I'm curious. Hit us up. Let us know as we keep on rolling. Let's go out to, I do believe this is a newcomer here. Oh, no, we talked about this one before, but it's been quite some time. This is in good old Invesco. Invesco Limited, ticker symbol IVZ. Trying to think, man, it's been many years since we chatted about this name. Right now, trading a little bit shy of $16, $15.96, off about 20 cents or so. Not a huge move for them today. On the year, let's see, a year ago they were $15.93, so they've net moved 3 cents on the year, listeners. So a whole heck of a lot of nothing if you were sitting in Invesco over the past year. That said, they did have some action. They rallied up to about $19 in August. Then they clipped its wings all the way down to the low for the year of $13.20. That was in September. And they popped it hard again. By November 11th, it was back up to 19 3/4. Hung out there for a while. They rallied it again in February 2nd, up to $20.50. And that was kind of all she wrote for the year. They started coming for it almost right away. By March 23rd, it was back to $15. And then they recently crushed it back down to about $14.38 just a couple weeks ago before rallying it again over the last couple of weeks up to where it is right now. Nearly $16. So a nice couple of weeks, about $1.60 the bank for Invesco. Over the course of the year, though, shrug your shoulders. A whole heck of a lot of nothing. 3 cents. So intriguing stuff out there. Let's see what our Eye of Sauron found out there. Again, that year, that net unched year, kind of show you why it doesn't show up on our radar all that often. But nonetheless, looks like somebody may be thinking there is more downside to come here in good old Invesco, coming in this morning, gobbling up 5,600 of the July 16 puts. They paid 54 cents for these, so right off the offer, that is an exactly 30 volatility, which is intriguing. The stock was a little bit higher, 16.20, when these bad boys went up. Looking here, there are no earnings. Earnings are still in July, but right outside of the expiration cycle, so they're not getting any earnings bump baked into these. This just seems to be a straight up gobbling a little bit of near term. Actually, this is at the money, so this is a fairly aggressive put buy here. Intriguing. Mr. Meatball, we don't see too many of these. Usually it's a little bit farther out of the money, maybe a little bit farther out. We don't really see a lot of straight up, at the money put buys that often in a lot of these names. And also not going through earnings. They stop right before earnings, which is also intriguing. What are your thoughts on these Invesco puts, sir?
Yeah, interesting. We saw some June puts about 3 weeks ago pay off. We might be due for another little turnaround here in Invesco. Would not surprise me.
Got our chat all fired up about cruises, debating whether they have been on a cruise. But Nichols saying he hasn't been on a cruise, but he has traded CCL and made money. So I have enjoyed the cruise industry in my own way. Well, there you go. What better way to enjoy a cruise than by not being on it, but by printing money off of it? So congratulations to you there, Mr. Nichols out there. What are your thoughts on this July roll and keeping the AUG 15s? You like it? You hate it? I'm curious. As someone who slung some CCL and is sitting on some green as a result, would you dive back in on those? It's an interesting question. All right, we've got some reviews we could look at here for the final names. Mr. Meatball, I'll let you pick. Do you want to review a trade in Credit Suisse, in good old EMR, or everyone's favorite name on the planet, sir? We've got Mattel. What's your choice, sir?
Oh, I love He-Man, so we've got to do Mattel.
I had a feeling you might go that way once I said that one. So let's go out to, this was a trade from June 16th, listeners. March 16th, all the way back on March 16th. Talked about somebody, it seemed like they loved themselves some upside in Mattel. I guess they were bullish on He-Man, maybe a little bit of Hot Wheels, a little bit of Barbie, whatever else they make over there. At the time, someone came in and scooped up about 2,000 of the April 16s. By the way, Mattel listeners, These are April, so it doesn't really matter if I tell you where they are right now. The stock trading 1840, so looking pretty good. A year ago, though, it was trading 2213, so it's had a bit of a rough year, off about nearly $4 or 17%. If you follow any of these big toy names, Hasbro, Mattel, they've all come under pressure, obviously. Inflation hurting them, people buying less of these discretionary type items like toys and things like that. So they're having to get creative with how they bring people to the dance. But back in March, looked like somebody was optimistic about their upside chances. Loading up on 2,000 of the April 16s, paying 79 cents when the stock was a little bit shy of $16, $15.93. And then they came in, did 1,700 more, actually 1,800 more almost, and they paid 80 cents for the second lot, 79 cents for the first lot. So gobbling up on a bunch of upside here. And it looks like they pretty much worked out, Mr. Meatball. The stock ended up closing an April expiration at $17.39. Looks like the first 2,000 lots that they bought was still open because there were exactly 2,000 left open on the strike. So maybe the 1,800 that they bought, they dumped those out earlier, but keeping 2,000, letting it ride, in which case they are now the proud owners of some Mattel stock, and that's looking pretty good because the stock now is $18.38, as I mentioned. So an intriguing trade. We don't usually see the calls stay on like that, Mr. Meatball. Usually they buy them and they close them out, but I guess they wanted themselves some stock, in which case looks like that play on He-Man worked out, sir.
Yeah. Mattel was really in the toilet and seems to have found a bottom off of $15. It's holding nicely above the 50-day. They're looking to see if this thing can get over the 200 and maybe make a run at 20. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen some call selling against this position, frankly.
Yeah, you might want to go the other way now. Take a little bit of that income out there. It'll be interesting to see how this big Barbie movie, how that affects Mattel. If all the little girls all of a sudden want Barbie again. I guess we shall find out as we keep on rolling. You know who always wants Barbie? It's Uncle Mike. Let's get to him. A little bit of the old strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the Strategy Block.
All right, listeners, let's get to a little bit of the old block of strategy. Uncle Mike, I have left you a lot of time at the end of the show, so you can explain in detail your love of and collection of all things Barbie. Do you have the Malibu beach house from 1985, sir?
I do not. I think, I'm more of a He-Man kind of guy. I did have Castle Grayskull. I had a lot of the He-Man characters. And one thing that I would encourage everyone to do is YouTube Skeletor's greatest insults. One of the problems with society today is that, I agree that we're better off as a society for not being negative to the kids today. Back in my day, if you also YouTube Bobby Knight halftime speech, that's the coaching that I grew up with in a lot of ways, which is definitely, I think we're better off that that's not there. However, at times I think the pendulum has swung a little bit too far the other way. And so if you YouTube Skeletor's greatest insults, you'll see spots to where he just says mean things to people. And, we need more of that in the youth of America these days. He talks to He-Man, says, "I've got you now, you muscle-bound oaf." That's one of my favorites. He also just, someone wanted to join Skeletor's gang, and Skeletor said no. And they said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because you're a wimp scientist, and you would likely be a wimp villain." And so, people don't call each other wimps anymore. I mean, we need more villains in cartoons like we used to have. I mean, wouldn't you guys agree with that?
I might say, Uncle Mike, you've done many strategy blocks here on the show. This is only a couple minutes in, but this might be your greatest strategy block yet, sir. Skeletor's, I didn't even know that even existed, and I'm a huge He-Man fan. I'll have to go look that up right now.
No, it's 2 minutes of joy that you'll be glad you saw it. I mean, it's phenomenal.
My favorite is the He-Man Christmas special when Skeletor becomes a good guy for a short period of time and joins the kids in fighting Hordak.
Oh, the evil Hordak. I remember him.
The evil Hordak.
The good guy Skeletor, he falls in the same realm as...
just silliness ensues.
He falls in the same realm as the Iraqi traitor Sergeant Slaughter for me. We don't speak of good guy Skeletor.
For sure. Well, one thing that I would like to talk about, and not much relation to Skeletor by any means, is let's talk about active versus passive hedging. If you are in a hedged position of some sort right now and it's market related, your hedge is less and less useful because the market is higher and higher. So in other words, let's just oversimplify everything right now. Let's say you just went long SPY and long put, and SPY is up significantly over the last couple months. Well, if that's the case, then your put really doesn't have as much effect as it did when you first bought it. Whether it was at the money, in the money, out of the money, whatever the case may be, it doesn't have the same effect. And the reason is of course, that it's more out of the money most likely. So the question then comes up is, should you roll that put up? Should you buy more protection? What should you do with that? And the answer is maybe. So here's where I'm going with this. An example of a passive hedge would be buying a put option on a stock that you own or an ETF, whatever the case may be, and you do absolutely nothing with it, meaning you're going to hold that till expiration. And you are going to you'll have the protection in place, but you're not going to have any more protection than what you originally wanted. Meaning the put will do its job. So if the stock does go down significantly, you have your protection in place. And then an example of an active hedge would be along the lines of, say, buying the put option and then making an adjustment if the stock goes higher or lower. Now, if the stock were to go lower, of course, then the passive hedge, you do nothing. You just wait till expiration, and then you exercise your put option, and then you're out at a much lower loss, most likely. But in an active hedge, it doesn't work that way. So let's talk about just an example with an active hedge. If the stock goes higher, one thing with which you can do is you can get out of the put option for one. Maybe you don't feel you need the protection anymore, or you could buy a put option at a higher strike price, rolling the put up. That would be an example of a more active hedge. And by doing that, you're buying more protection as the stock goes higher. And it's kind of a way of taking money off the table. Now, can you get burned doing that? Absolutely. No question about it. The way you'd get burned on the way up is if the stock just kept going up. You're buying more put premium you didn't need it. Now, let's say that the stock goes lower. An example of active hedging would be something along the lines of taking profit on the put option and then maybe buying another put at a lower strike price. And if that's the case, then the stock goes up after you do that, you're feeling pretty smart. But if the stock continues to go down, you're paying more time premium than you initially wanted to, most likely. And you didn't really need to do that roll down, and you won't make as much money on your hedge by doing it. So understand there's an advantage and a disadvantage to both active hedging and passive hedging. Now, which one do I like better? My answer is yes. I like a little bit of both. I think each of them have a place in your portfolio, and that's kind of my take on active versus passive. So if I was Skeletor talking to He-Man, I've got you now, you muscle-bound oaf.
You got to do your best Skeletor voice when you say that, though.
I'm not even capable of doing that. Skeletor is that good.
I think we have hit on one thing. I love this show. It's been running for over a decade. If I could add one thing to the show, it needs more Skeletor. So I think we need to work to add that into every episode of the show as we keep on rolling and we go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block. Our chat's down with it. Option God saying Skeletor, yes. Nichols saying he loves He-Man. So, yeah, our chat's down with some 80s goodness. They love 80s wrestling. Who doesn't love a little bit of the old Skeletor in there as well? I'm going to send you a link later, Uncle Mike. It's going to blow your mind talking all things Skeletor. But let's keep on rolling. I'll check out your link, too, of Skeletor's greatest insult. Sounds like a good time. Speaking of a good time, listeners, it's always a good time when you play along and vote in our questions of the week. That's how you make your voice heard at the end of the day. The powers that be, they watch our polls, listeners. So if you want to weigh in on products or events or happenings that are going on, do that there. People are paying attention. Let's go out right now. Let's see. Last week's question of the week. Well, we did our kind of seasonal check-in on your outlook for the markets. We said we've seen a lot of green on the screen this year, but we've also seen aggressive bursts of selling that can turn things red quickly. Quite simply, will SPX or SPY close positive on the year? Heck yes, 57.9%. Heck no, 42.1%. So there still is a good, strong, bearish contagion out there. Obviously, statistically, all things being equal, we're probably going to end positive. So you thought maybe Heck Yes would take it even stronger than it did. So kind of intriguing results there. In terms of this week, we're turning it up again, listeners, asking you quite simply, VIX continues to drop, except for today, obviously. As soon as we post this, VIX goes up. While rates continue to go mostly up, we'll find out later this week if that continues. It's challenging to generate income using options while the rewards for cash are substantial, which raises the question, are you still selling covered calls in this environment? Gave you 4 choices. Yes, I just sell them closer to the at the money. Or yes, I'm okay with a little bit less income. Or no, there's just too much risk, or I'm already in cash. I'm just done. I'm taking my cash monies and getting the heck out of Dodge. Or no, there's just not enough income for me to pull the trigger right now. Let's go out to the greasiest of meatballs. Mr. Meatball, are you surprised at the results of last week's poll? Pretty close to 50-50, but a slight majority for bulls out there. And then B, what are your thoughts on this week's poll? What do you think our audience is up to?
I think it's interesting that, our audience that's generally pretty bearish is kind of bullish. That's interesting. And for this week, what were my options?
I knew you were going to say that, so I just pasted that into the chat for you there. But yes, it is just sell closer to at the money, or I'm okay with less income. So both of them for yes. So both of them means you're still selling covered calls. Or no, there's too much risk. I'm already in cash. I'm not selling covered calls. Or no, there's not enough income to be found. I'm not selling covered calls.
I'm for no, there's not enough income. With vol where it is, there are some stocks where you can do well. But the stocks where the vol is really high are the ones that are flying around. So, a lot of we're at 52-week low implied vols for all the names where you would think about selling covered calls for implied volatility, and all the names where, they're just flying around. Those are the ones that you actually don't want to sell calls on. So I'd be for that one.
Mr. Uncle Mike, a.k.a. the guy who's going to do the best Skeletor impersonation you've ever heard right now.
Well, I can't do it.
I set you up.
I'm not going to dishonor Skeletor. My voice just doesn't do that.
I did throw you a curveball there. It was fun. I wanted to see what you came up with. What are you voting for, and what do you think our audience is voting for?
I think our audience is voting for no, not enough juice, like Mark is. I'm of the school of thought, like selling juice is an asset class. So we're still selling juice in our triple income portfolio, and we're still getting some juice on the stocks that we're selling it on. So it's not as generous as it was before, but it's still worth doing. We are going a little bit more out of the money, and there's still some juice out of the money with the stocks that we're in. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Let's see what our audience is up to right now. Again, this just went live a few minutes ago, listeners. We'll paste the link into the chat if you guys want to vote. You can find it. It's easy to find. Add options right at the top of our profile there, listeners. And right now it's a tie. No running away with it. 42.9% each. Or no, there's too much risk, or I'm already in cash. Or no, there's just not enough income to be found. I am not doing it. Yes, 14.3% saying, yes, I just sell a little closer to the at the money. Nobody's okay with less income right now. That's getting no love. So that is our question of the week. You folks on the podcast will be able to vote. We will discuss more results in that later on in the week. But now let's go around the block. Let's go back to Uncle Mike, sir. What are you keeping an eye on for the rest of this week?
I mean, it's fed. There's really nothing else to watch right now. Seeing if we can continue to make new highs for the year for the SPX, but it's the Fed right now.
Well, there's one other thing to watch is your 2-minute YouTube video on Skeletor. I'm going to be watching that after the show. All right. Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on for the rest of this week until our Thursday?
We've got CPI, we've got the Fed. Those are going to be the two things that really drive the market. Not a lot of earnings. The market is crawling higher. The NASDAQ continues to just, outperform everything. And the Magnificent Seven continue to just stretch higher and higher and higher. And, that's kind of the question, how high can they stretch? I think is the question of the week.
Well, technically, our question of the week is about the selling income with covered calls. But an additional question of the week could be, how high could the super, uber, magnificent, sexy 7 rally over the span of the coming week? That music means we got to get out of here for this episode, listeners. But do not worry. We have more content coming up for the crypto rundown in a little bit. So all you folks hanging out in the live, stay tuned. I'll be back in a little bit with Josh Frazier from Origin Protocol, breaking down all sorts of creative. A lot of great guests, string of great guests on that show. Twitter afire, crypto Twitter at least. Loving all things crypto rundown. See what all the fun is about. Join us in a little bit if you're in the live, or of course after the fact. Just hit next on the old OB feed, or the old network feed, I should say, and you'll have it in your hot little ear holes. And Mr. Uncle Mike, if they want more goodness in their eye holes, or perhaps to read, or perhaps to talk to you, where should they go? What should they do?
At Mike TOSAW. Follow me on Twitter, or check out my website, stcharleswealth.com.
Was that your attempt at a Skeletor? Is that what that was?
No, the music's playing so loud I can't hear myself think.
Oh,
It is loud.
Oh, there we go. How's that? That a little better? There you go.
Much.
All right.
At Mike TOSAW on Twitter, stcharleswealth.com if you're looking for a financial advisor who talks 80s pro wrestling, Skeletor, and options all in one.
There we go. There we go. Don't want to blow out Uncle Mike's sensitive eardrums. Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on? Or should I? We already did that. Where should folks go if they want to learn more about all your goodness?
Just head over to optionpit.com and you can find everything you need to know. You'll be happy and you're going to love it. Join us.
Optionpit.com. Maybe you can find a Skeletor clip or two there as well. Optionpit.com, the place to go. Got to get on out of here. Back again in a little bit for all you live folks with the crypto rundown. Back again throughout the rest of the week with our usual assortment of content. You'll get your options bootcamp goodness. For all you live folks, that's already here hitting the pro feed because we recorded those earlier. So you folks got live access to them when they were recorded. Of course, they're up on the pro feed. And you folks on demand will be getting them in your feed on Wednesday. Back again on Thursday, another episode of the old OB. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.